What am I to do?
Welcome to He Said, She Said Razor Branding Podcast with Michael Russo and Jaci Russo. To learn more about how to improve your brand, visit brandRUSSO.com.
You said, let's start with talking about rebranding. I say, let's go all the way back and talk about what is rebranding. You know, we use industry lingo. Let's make some explanations as to what rebranding is so people know if this is even something they should keep listening to.
Or if it's something they need to do. I mean,
Right.
a lot of times somebody will come in, and I think with a lot of agencies, the first thing people throw on the table is, oh, you need a new logo. And that's just such a small part of it, right? I mean, it's a big part, right? If you have a bad logo or if it's not representing who you are or what you do, that's a problem, right? But that's not the only problem. And that's not really what constitutes an entire rebranding system, is it?
So let's start with what is rebranding.
Okay.
A part of rebranding is the brand identity, the actual logo itself, right? The image, the colors, the typeface. If it was designed in 1983, it might be time for a rebrand. So brand identity evolutions can be a big part of it. What else factors into rebranding?
I mean, at least when we look at it, it goes into messaging. It goes into, who your audience is. It's a deeper look into that, right? How do you brand yourself when you don't know who it is that you're trying to talk to or trying to relate to or message to or involve yourself with, So those are all questions that you have to ask. And so sometimes people knee jerk and they want to go, well, I just need a new logo. Okay, but that's a Band-Aid maybe. It's an important part, but it's not the only part.
Well, the visual identity is important. It represents the brand. Obviously, when we talk about the brand as a whole, that's the emotional connection that people have with your company, products, and services. So it's how do people feel? So when the owner of a company or the chief marketing officer or the board thinks it's time for a rebrand, there's a lot of questions that go into that. What are the first things that you ask yourself?
As who?
As you, Michael Russo, creative director, chief creative officer, brandRUSSO, what are the first questions you ask yourself for your process of guiding someone through a rebrand?
I mean, it's a big question. It's not just one thing. I mean, like I said, we go into, it starts with the visual, right?
Okay.
What's the first impressions? What do you feel right away about it? And then the research.
Whose first impressions?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I look at it from my own experience and my own perspective, what are my gut reactions for that? But I can't just go with that. I have to have more involved, which is we involve our research team. We involve, looking around at competitors analysis. What does the market look like? And make sure that we're on path with that, and it's not like we have to follow the leader, but we want to make sure we're in the right space. I don't want to detract from anything or send people, sometimes what does your logo say for you when you're not there to say it for yourself, right? Because sometimes that's the first introduction on a website or a social media post, or when you come across an identity, what do you think right away? And if that's a, counterintuitive system where you are causing confusion, then you've already kind of lost the game right there. So yeah, I want to start with the basics. Like, how does it make you feel? And does it feel like it's at least professional and trustworthy and quality? Those are three big things right there.
But when you say how does it make you feel, you mean the people inside the company and their target audience, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
the answer I was trying to get you to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I think people discount how important it is to have a, did you just look at the camera?
Oh, I've twice had to look at the camera, yes. The people need to know when I am annoyed.
Anyway, I think people discount the importance of having a great brand identity, even for internally for a company. I mean, we've seen time and time again. You go in and you make something new and fresh, and you have new apparel and new promo items and new swag, and it reinvigorates and it lifts people up. It's like you want to have that banner and that flag out in front that says this is who we are. Something you really be proud of. Something you're proud to wear. Something you want to see people promote. And if it's ugly or too obnoxious or not cool factor to it, nobody's ever going to wear it. Nobody's going to put it on things. Nobody's going to say, hey, I'm proud to be part of this group. I'm wearing this as a badge of honor. Like, take the Apple logo or Nike swoosh, for example. People put those on their cars and they wear shirts with them, and they're proud to represent them because it represents who they are. And the people want to say, hey, I'm part of that tribe. I'm part of that club. This is part of who I am too. And when you associate yourself with that, you need to have an emblem that says those things as well, I think.
But this isn't just about being trendy, about having cool merch to wear.
No.
There's a deeper, more psychological connection that people have to the logo and the company and products that it represents. So let's talk about how you know when it's time to rebrand. What are those big signals that trigger for a company? I need to get some professional feedback on, are we in the right spot, or do we need to go through an evolution?
Why do I feel like I'm being interviewed right now? I should be
Well,
interviewing
you haven't asked me any questions, so.
Well, I would ask the same of you.
Okay.
Because you're kind of on the front lines of that. I mean, I'm rarely in those meetings initially. So, but I would say, some of the main factors is your logo dated? Is your identity not fresh and modern? Is it not representational? Is it
Well, hold on though. Coca-Cola logo is like 200 years old.
that's timeless though?
Oh, nice. So if it's trendy, if it was created with some certain stylized elements of a certain decade or century, and you've now progressed past that, it's time to evaluate.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Coke's a great example because they did have new identity and new logos when they changed the ingredients, and that was a train wreck and a disaster. And they eventually went back to the Coca-Cola script. I mean, they are a timeless company. They have history. There's a reason to hang on to that equity, Right. And even when we take on a logo project, where it's not always a scrap and build over. It's not always a rebuild. A lot of time, more than most of the times, it's an evolution. We take what they have and we evolve it into something new and modern, right? Because you don't want to kill everything, all the equity, unless it's bad, unless there's bad connotation, there's bad reputation, bad perceptions in the marketplace, and you want to start all over. That's reasonable, right? But if you already have something that exists and you've been around for a while, there's no reason to tear it down. But it can always be modernized and improved and made more digital friendly, and all these things that come into that. Right. How are you living in the real world today?
So when I think about that, and I go back to Coke because I just think that a lot of people use it as an example. It's well known. One of the things that I think is really important is you talked about consistency. Brand standards factor in a lot to being able to maintain that consistency. Talk about what that is, how that sounds, what that feels like, what those are.
Brand standards are vital, and I think no one really takes them as far as they probably should. Sometimes it's a logo sheet, and it tells you, here's your colors, here's your how it's, it looks reversed, how it looks here, how it looks small, how it looks big. Those are important, right? Because you want to maintain that consistency over time. But even more than that, your brand standards are your messaging and your what's your tone, what's your voice, how are you going to use this document to keep everybody on message, on the page at all times, and that can be a really long, lengthy document that should take time doing, or again, it could just be a visual representation of how do you use your brand identity. I think but the brand standards, a guideline, goes a lot more deeper than that.
Right. No, I agree. So let's talk about when it's time to rebrand. We mentioned earlier that if it was created at a certain time frame, and so it was connected to that era, and times have changed, styles have changed, it wasn't made timeless, then it's going to look kind of dated. What are some of the other ways that a company starts to think, oh, maybe I need to consider some options?
I think if you feel like, and you talked about this the other day, maybe you can elaborate, but it's, are you feeling like you're not connecting with your audience? Do you feel like, the phone maybe has stopped ringing a little bit? You feel like your competitors are moving by you and you need to change something up, and you feel like your product's still good. You feel like you're still the best kept secret in the marketplace, but nobody's hearing you. How do you get a little bit of splash in that, And it may not just be from a visual representation, but it's something to re-energize the troops. Maybe it's something internal. It's something that reconnects everyone and puts them on the same page.
Well, I don't want somebody to interpret that to say that if the phone stops ringing, you have to change your logo.
No,
I know that's
I
not
didn't
what you
mean
mean.
No. But you're asking for like trigger points or things that
Right.
makes you start to consider rebrand. So I'll ask you that.
Right.
What are some of those things?
Oh, yeah. See, I came prepared, so I had questions, but yes. Well, I think first and foremost, you have to look at your target audience. That's where we always begin. And so has your audience evolved over time?
That's kind of what. Yes,
That's not what you actually said.
That's what I was thinking.
Answer the question, Mr. Russo. Is that what you actually said? You can't handle the truth. No, I think that's important. You always start with your target audience. Don't start laughing again, because then I'm going to start laughing again, and this whole thing's going to get off the rails. If your audience has changed over time, then you need to look at your visuals. I also think it's about your product line. If what you do has evolved and changed over time, it's time to look at how is it represented? Is it properly? We talked about timeless design. I think that's important. I think that a lot of our clients, at least, have gotten into the great pattern of acquisition. So they have merged or acquired new companies, and there needs to be some sort of evolution there. What now represents the entire organization instead of them being very fractured? We talk a lot about the House of Brands, branded house examples. And so I use the illustrations
For
of
those that may not know what that is, talk about the branded
Tracy in
house.
Minnesota. Yes, I was just going to say I use the illustration of Procter and Gamble. That's a house of brands. Procter and Gamble owns a lot of different companies: Tide, Duracell, Bounce, dryer sheets. I don't know, 200 and something companies. Each one of those has their own brand identity, their own messaging, their own marketing campaign. That gets expensive. Compare that at the opposite end of the spectrum to Dove, Dove body wash, Dove shampoo, Dove conditioner, Dove moisturizer. And we all have that visual: white bottle, gold bird, very clear. And so those are the opposite ends. House of Brands, branded house. Most companies fit somewhere on that spectrum. So to reevaluate the business case for, have we outgrown who we were before? Are we in a place where, as we acquire new companies, launch new divisions, is what we're doing still properly representing? That's, I think, an important question to ask.
Yeah, and you're talking about brand architecture, and that's something we deal a lot with, actually, especially larger companies, more national and global companies. They usually have divisions. They usually have, and it's usually when we come in, unfortunately, it's a mess. They've either grown too quickly and they didn't deal with those things right away as they took on companies or divisions. They kind of left them as they were, or they tried to force them a square peg into the round hole and it just didn't fit. Now all of a sudden they get really big and they don't know what to do with themselves. And there's a problem. I mean, your audience gets confused, your internal systems get confused, and nobody knows what the hell's going on. So having that brand architecture is really important. And sometimes it's not as much as evolving a logo or redesigning a logo or a brand identity system. It's organizing it better. Where's the naming architecture? How do things fall within things? Are they divisions or are they separate companies? How do you market them? Do you need separate websites for them? Do you need separate social media pages for them? It gets very heady. It gets very heady. And there's a lot of consequences to this. I'm going to pull this away and I'm going to change this. And all of a sudden, internally, people are like panicking now, and within the company even, and outside, they may be confused. Oh, did they change? Are they new ownership? Are they going out of business? They must be having trouble because they're doing all these changes. Or do you position it as, oh, things are happening there. This is exciting. They're actually, putting back money back into what they're doing. They care about their product. They care about how they're seen, and the perceptions can go along with that.
Yeah. I think it's interesting when you talk about perceptions, because branding is built on perceptions, that two people can see the exact same situation and see it in very different ways. And I think the best visual of that is the number written on the ground. Facing it this way, it's a 6. Facing it that way, it's a 9. They're both right, but very different perceptions as to what the image is. So when we talk about brand identity perceptions, there's, I think, always some concern and hesitation about how much it's going to cost them, both financially and emotionally, to their target audience when they start making changes. So there has to be a business case for it. And I think one of the things that's so good in the ebook that we just are launching right now is I think we do a really good job of explaining the business case for rebranding, to look at the pros and cons of the financial and emotional investment into that. We worked with an organization that went through a rebranding, and it required changing 3,000 different signs on all of their physical properties combined, 3,000 different signs. That was not a small, light decision to make. And so when that happens, there's got to be kind of a pro-con list that somebody in the financial department is going to be looking at. So there has to be some really good reasons. And I think you touched on it. When you have the potential to upsell and cross-sell, when you have the potential to get people's attention again, when you have the opportunity to re-energize the base, when you have the chance to push your growth forward on a little bit of a higher trajectory, those often outweigh the expense.
Yeah, and all that could make you nervous about it or apprehensive about it.
Well, it makes you nervous because you have to do it right.
Well, people that are investing in it should be nervous, and they probably are, right. Especially if you're a marketing director being put in charge of this, or you're a business owner deciding to do it, or there's a committee involved, which can be a nightmare, by the way. Just when there's 20 people trying to decide on one thing, you have a lot of opinions, and it could stall the process, and it could train wreck the process. And you can end up doing what we call here Frankensteining in a project where you have different parts all put together to make a monster, basically. And it is a monster. It usually doesn't work out as well as you think. And now, well, let's try this, or let's put this together here. Let's put that together here. Just so it said, the perfect identity is the least common denominator. It's when you can get all of this down to one thing. And it doesn't always have to be literal. It doesn't always have to,
Well, hold on. You mean I shouldn't have an image of every single product that the company sells in the actual brand identity?
No,
Are you sure?
I'm positive.
There are a lot of people out there that are going to be quite shocked to hear that.
Yeah. An apple does not represent computers. It's just an apple with a bite out of it. There's a lot of meaning behind it and what it means. But there's,
This is shocking new information.
Is it representational of who you are? Does it give you a feeling or vibe? Now, if you happen to come across something that visually represents what you do, that's great. That's awesome. If you happen to be a surfboard shop and you can put a surfboard in there, that's great.
But
People
don't you
see it.
also sell surf shorts
So
and
you want-
surf shirts
Yes.
and surf wax and surf lessons?
Yeah. Well, yes, there's a lot of things that go into all those things. So it's complicated, but that brings me to the next point is too, because nowadays with technology and what's out there, and it's not just a sell for us in any way. I think you go to a professional, you go to somebody that really has years of experience with this stuff, because, you can go online and get your brother's cousin, sister who knows Photoshop to do some wacky logo thing. But chances are they aren't thinking about these things that we're talking about. They haven't experienced the pitfalls of doing it wrong. You see a lot of times people will, a major corporate giant that everybody knows launches a new branding thing and it's a failure because everybody knows right away. Like somehow they didn't see the fact that it looked like something else, or the fact that it was culturally offensive, or the fact that or it's just bad, and it's panned and they've invested millions in it and it goes badly. Now there's always a risk, right? But hopefully you have enough people involved that can see those things through and say, all right, this is not a good idea. We probably need to do this, and listen to that advice. And regardless of who you pick somebody with experience.
Well, and I think we've seen that a lot lately. And there's a time and a place for a freelancer, for a boutique agency, for a large full service entity, global agency. They each have their role, and you're going to get what you pay for. What we've seen, I think, and I all the trades have commented on it, whether it's Ad Age or Adweek or even some of the major business publications, that there's a draw right now for easy and cheap. And so going online and picking someone in a kind of a crowdsourcing way has had some huge, expensive ramifications. And so no matter the size of your company and the size of your budget, I think to take the time to really investigate, are you legally going to own what's been created for you? Do you have all the safety checks in place to make sure that it's not any sort of a trademark violation, that it can be copyrighted, that it was custom drawn? I think another set of questions to look at is how much research went into the application of this version that you're interested in. So there's a lot to be considered. And I think that used to just be the challenge of a small business. Small businesses want to do it on the cheap, so they took some shortcuts. We're now seeing this permeate into big companies making some of those same choices, and there've been a lot of negative impacts.
Well, and when it comes to design in general, and again, I think what we really focus on is the what's the word, overall picture of things, like the messaging, and a lot of things go into a rebranding or brand in general. We're just talking about design and the creative process behind that. It's easy for people to get involved with that because everybody's got an opinion, right? I mean, we see it every day. We're hit with logos and identities and messaging and all this stuff. So it's easy from an advertising perspective to say, yeah, I can do that. But again, your own personal preferences and your own personal needs have to kind of go out of the window. You have to really look at your audience and see what they want, what's going to resonate with them. And you can push back your own objective on there, but that's not the goal. The goal is to find out, what lives in harmony with everything.
Right. Well, and I think that's interesting. I every time somebody says, well, I don't know if my customer's going to like this, I'm reminded of Henry Ford's comment that if I'd asked them what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. So it's a very fine line blend between what they want and what they need, what they know to ask for, and what is possible that they didn't even know was an option. And I think that's why you get an outside, unbiased, third-party professional to come in and provide some thoughtful 20,000-foot view kind of considerations. And what I also think happens that can be so important is when you take it outside the company, the immediate company, the client, and you get that outside third party, you get some perspective through research that is really clear because the agency can serve as a translator where the company might be somewhat defensive of the feedback that they received. And so it's about how do we balance that feedback.
Nobody wants to be told they have an ugly baby. I mean, you said that many times, and I agree. It's like that is the worst part about this is when you sit in front of somebody and tell them that their logo is bad or their identity is bad or even their messaging is bad or whatever it may be. A lot of times it could be the person in the room that designed it or they personally were attached to it. And you have to take those things into consideration, but you also have to be honest, right? And say, all right, well, if this is what we're working with, that's fine. How do we position it properly? How do we put that in the right light, and how do we avoid the mistakes? And so an ugly logo or ineffective logo or a non-connecting logo is part of the deal. But if you're stuck with it, people are like, look, we're not changing, period. Then how do we use it better?
Right.
How do we modify the things around it? How do we make sure that there's standards in place that don't put it in a bad light? How do we make it the best we can? And maybe there's just some superficial things and it's changing the descriptor or changing, the color structure or whatever. How do we evolve those things? And that's part of the tinkering process when you're left with not much. I mean, we're doing that right now with a global company, and we're tied to something because they're tied to a bigger entity that owns them. And so like, okay, well, what do we do with that? We can only do so much. So how do we assess that? And we're in the process of that now with them, going kind of back and forth and figuring things out. It's a challenge, but it's an exciting challenge too, because there are answers. We just have to find them, and it's a process. It's not overnight. It's not going to find, okay, well, this is quick. Usually the first thing that comes to mind, the first thing you get back is not the best one. That's why we do series,
right?
And we do round and rounds. And so
let's talk about that for a minute. Talk to me about your process.
Well, here internally, we have a creative team of designers, and everyone gets the project when it comes to identities.
Start all the way back at the beginning, the kickoff call.
Well, yeah, it goes back to there even.
But that's how it starts, right?
Yeah. Well, usually I'm not brought in until there's something
Kickoff
on the table. Yes, and then usually there's a signed document. We are now participating, and that's when I get brought in. And
my God, man, start with the kickoff call.
It starts with the kickoff call.
Thank you.
And there's a kickoff call, and we talk about everything. We get to ask questions. We get to talk to the client directly and their team, find out the good, the bad, and the ugly. We get to look at, they send us all their materials over after that. We get to look through everything. And depending on how deep the conversation is, it could just be a brand identity or brand architecture or brand naming system project, or it could be part of the Razor branding process that we do, which is a full assessment that deals with messaging and everything else that goes in there. That being said, we try to look at every project through the eyes of Razor branding, which is, again, takes those things into consideration: the focus, promise, connection, harmony.
You're just one.
But it's important because
the kickoff call to the team.
What do we find out in those kickoff calls? We find out who the audience is, or we try to figure out the best we can.
Yes.
We figure out the promise, the why. Why is it important? Why should people care? We figure out the connection. What are you saying to them? How do you talk to them? What's your voice? What's your tone? And the where is where are you saying it to them at right currently, and where do you want to say that at? And if we know those answers, we can figure out a lot more. And even if it's not from a full assessment, we try to still get some insight into those answers.
Yes.
And that helps us down the path. We also find out, how much equity do you think you have existing in your mark? Are there any things to avoid right off the bat? Things you don't like? I mean, like, look, don't use the color red. Don't ever do this. Or, we got to know their competitors, because we can't have a logo that looks like a competitor. Or if we're going to do that, we better damn well do it good and go up against them and challenge them, So there's all these things that come from that, and it starts the kickoff call. From there, my team, everybody gets to sign the project, and we're all involved at that point. And we may see hundreds of logos come in to my discretion at that point. We'll look at them, we'll have feedback internally, we'll bounce around ideas, and we'll weed that down into whatever's the best ones. And if the best ones are 30, we're going to show 30. Not to complicate it, but we want to give options. We want to show people the depth, and this comes from different designers. So everybody's going to have a different take in that. So you're getting the work of the team, not just me or somebody else. And I try to really stay hands off with that, not direct it too much. I want to get everybody's personal opinions in there. And then we'll present, and then from there we'll weed down. And we'll try again, least common denominator. We get down, we find elements from things that do work. We find out what they like. And we usually start to get an idea more and more as we show things where their head is and what they really want. And that helps us define what we're doing as well.
And that's it, we're done?
I don't know, what's next?
I mean, a couple versions of that, a couple series of that until we get down to the right one.
Yeah, we're not, I know a lot of times I've talked to other designers and firms, and they're like, no, we do 3 rounds of 5 logos each, and then we're done. I'm like, we don't do that. I mean, there is a limit at some point. You have to kind of get to there. But usually if we do this right, we start here and we get here pretty quickly.
But there could be 3, 4, 5 rounds.
Oh yeah,
because
no,
it got to go until you find the right one.
It's a process. Again, it should be personal. It should be emotional. This is your logo and mark. This represents you. This is your flag, your banner. It's not something to be taken lightly. And so I understand that people's passion about it and not knowing things. It's hard when you get the person that says, I don't know what I like until I see it, you know? But if we ask the right questions, we should be able to figure that out. We should be able to get there pretty quickly.
Right. So a winner is chosen, a victor has emerged, and then?
We're done. We can have beers.
Oh my God, I'm so done with you. No, then we create the brand standards off of that.
We do. And yeah, so immediately
They don't pay me enough.
Yeah, we do. And the brand standards is its own process. Again, it can start with the very basic of just having identity breakdowns and colors and all those things. But, it goes deeper into the type you're going to use. It can go deeper into the templates you use in your social media and your ads. It can go deeper into your apparel and what you wear. It can be lengthy. Your messaging, your tone, your voice, internally, what are you saying? Externally, what are you saying? What is your process? All those things can be put into brand standards, and it could be a project unto its own.
Yeah. All right, good. So the winner has been chosen. The brand standards have been created. What do you recommend a company does with this new look that they have?
Well, that kind of leaves my hands at that point, and our strategy and our brand developers take over in the launch process. And we have it's a process too. You can pull the Band-Aid off and just start over tomorrow and spend money and turn everything overnight, right? Or it can be gradual, and you could slowly weed in as things weed out. It depends on the extremity of the transformation. Is it an evolution, or is it? You just checked your watch while I'm talking.
I did.
It depends on the evolution, right? And am I boring you? Is that one?
I have another appointment. I have to keep myself on schedule.
But yeah, and how the complexity of it is. But I think that's all. We have a checklist that goes into this, right? And it's okay. What do you have to change? The things people don't think about, like my billing and my this and my invoices and
email signatures. There's little things that'll mess you up.
Yeah, it can be a lot. And again, or it could be something that's a minor change, and you say, all right, we're just going to do this as new things come on board, as we order new things and that kind of thing.
But so we have a checklist that we're going to go through and make sure we're checking all those things, because we've done this enough times now. We kind of know what to expect.
And is it a launch or not? Are we going to kick it off? Are we going to have a big party and an evolution? We're going to send out things, or we're going to, because sometimes we have to convince the party that it's okay that we're changing. And we need to let the internal staff know that, yeah, this is a good thing.
Right.
I want you to get excited about it. So everybody's going to get maybe a jacket or something, or something exciting, and maybe there's a party for it, and everybody's like happy, and we build up buy-in, because we've got to have buy-in. If we don't have buy-in, then it's kind of pointless, really.
Yeah, we've done pep rallies. We've done some fun things around rebrandings.
Absolutely.
So I think we've done a pretty good job of covering when people know it's time. We've done a pretty good job of covering what the steps are going to feel like. I think we've talked about what happens, after it's been completed. Let's talk a little bit about some pitfalls. What are some things that people should do their best to avoid in this process? Whether it's through the steps of hiring a partner that's going to help them, or the steps of their decision-making process. How do they judge when they're on the right track and when they're off? I think
before anything, the pitfalls is not knee-jerk, not react quickly. If someone walks in your office and immediately throws out, because that's the easy pick, that's low-hanging fruit, right? If you're working with a group or an internal people, and like the first thing you want to do, and I still talk about this because we did a project, I don't want to mention any names, and it was really, I liked it, I was passionate about it, and then change of guards, change of marketing directors, change of agencies, whatever, and they immediately, the first thing they did was come in and tear down all the work we did, and it was their prerogative and their positioning for that, but there was no reason for it. Now they could have changed some things, but there was no reason to do that other than they wanted to put their flag in the ground and say, this is easy to do. I can make my presence known right away by change the logo. That shouldn't be the first thing that's talked about.
Okay, so first takeaway is marketing directors and chief marketing officers, don't change the logo just because you can, to put your thumb on it.
Yeah, I mean, is it working? Have you asked those questions? Not just based on someone's opinion. Talk to your audience, talk to people, whatever. And you may have your own reasons, but just don't let it be the first thing, because that's an easy thing, and it's not always going to result in what you think it's going to.
It's hard and it's expensive.
It is, but it's easier for somebody to recommend it. It keeps people busy. If I'm looking for busy work, it's like, yeah, I can redo your logo, and it makes you feel like you're valued, or you're doing something that's proactive. And sometimes it's really needed, but again, it's not always. So you have to find a way to, Are you evolving to something new? Where are you going with it? Where's the destination?
Right.
Those things are all very important.
Right.
So not knee jerking, not. Also at the same time, picking a partner is really important, whoever you're going to work with. Not go, I mean, you don't have to sell your first child to get this done either. It shouldn't be billions of dollars. And some people charge billions of dollars for these things, like a lot of money. But it also should be cheap, because it's not. The time it takes to do this stuff, there's a value to it, right? And at the same time, being able to find someone that you really trust and can listen to. You don't have to you don't have to say yes to everything somebody says. There should be a conversation. There should be involvement. But if you're going to tell them what to do, then why?
And that's the third piece. Don't turn them into order takers.
Yeah.
You're hiring them for their expertise.
You might as well go in the cheap and then just have somebody do what you tell them to do. Right. Instead of getting the advice and the back and forth process, which is the most beneficial side of that.
Right. Well, and I think the research, which you touched on earlier, I think that's a very important piece of all this. You've got to make sure that you're doing the due diligence to make the right choices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can tell, that's the thing. I mean, somebody will come in. You do a lot of assessments. I meant to bring that up earlier. And a lot of times I'll come in to assess the identity and give my opinion on those things. And a lot of times you have to admit, I don't go right in for the kill. I don't go, I'm not like, if it's good, it's good.
Yes.
And I'll say it. And,
Well, I want to make a point because you did an assessment the other day for a brand identity. I did not like the logo. I felt like it didn't really represent the company very well. It was a very small technical piece that they were using as a visual that as a potential customer, I didn't understand. And so that was confusing. And, it's an initial name. Initial names are tough because what do they represent? What do they mean? And so I just saw a lot of challenges with it. And I thought you were going to say they need a new logo. I was stunned when you came back and your assessment was to put a box around the visual. It was transformative. It went from something that I thought was kind of a train wreck to something that now is sharp and tight and bold and good. And it was just amazing. And so, and if you had just said put a box around it, I wouldn't have gotten it. But because you visually demonstrated how it can evolve, I thought, oh, that is such a perfect solution.
And we don't normally do that. We didn't charge them for that. We gave them a solution but it was such a simple fix. And it was like, I want you to see, I want you to see how easy this could be. And, that kind of thing. It was, it was like, and again, we don't normally do that early on, but it was just one of those easy fixes that it was like, you don't have to go back to the well house.
The assessment process, I think we've gotten really good at because it literally has a beginning, middle, and end. It's not a chance to upsell work. It's not a way to worm our way in. It is a service that is provided for a fee. And now people get an unbiased outside third-party professional evaluation of how they spend money, how their logo looks, how their social media works, how their websites are. And that's valuable. Because, if you have an in-house team that's been there for a while and they're kind of doing the same things they've always done, it's nice to have some outside perspective.
Yeah, and I'll be biased with this. I think it's really good. We've done this long enough to know, the past 25 years. Right. It's like, how many times have we gone in and seen a consultant report come to us and it has their thoughts on it. I'm reading through it going, they said nothing. Right. That's why it's still on the shelf. There was no proactivity. It was just, this is what we think and this is what you maybe should do. But it was no
I don't even think it gets that specific sometimes. Sometimes it's like, hey, best practices is to have a really good logo with 2 colors. Well, yes, I could have Googled that. How do I fix my logo? Yeah. What do I change in my messaging? And so I think after doing a couple hundred of these, we've gotten pretty good at making sure we're providing actionable insights, which is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we're not giving the answer right away, but we're saying that this is what is possible. And these are the ideas. This is what you maybe haven't thought of. Right. And based on a lot of different factors, and again, that's the hard part, right? It can't be based on my personal opinion, even though that has something to do with it based on my experiences and my knowledge.
But your personal opinion is fueled by education, experience, best practices, protocols, and a whole lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah. But all that means is that it's still my personal opinion. You don't know me. You don't know me. How do you trust me for that? Right. But that's why we provide so much research and so much data and so much insight into their audience. Right. It's not us telling them the answer. The answers are out there. If you look hard enough, if you talk to the audience, you get to know them, they're going to tell you where to go. Because at the end of the day, they define the brand. They define who you are and how they think of you. Their perceptions of you is what it's all about. Fact. And if you can, you can't dictate to them. You can't tell them what to think, but you can definitely influence what they think by knowing what they like. knowing their lifestyles and saying, you know what, this is going to connect with them. How do we infuse all that into this thing called a logo, which seems so simple and lately is almost underrated?
Right. I need to leave us with two important messages. One, there is a rebranding book that is available for download on our website, and the link is in the show notes. And two, we've managed to go almost 40 minutes without disagreeing on something, which is going to be really disconcerting for our usual listeners. It's a little disconcerting for me. I'm very confused. I was in a meeting the other day, and somebody said, let me get this straight. So you're married, you have kids, and you work together. Because you didn't have enough to fight about with the marriage and the kids, you had to add the work thing. And I thought, that's exactly what it was. We needed a third reason to have something to disagree about. So, I mean, do we leave this without any discord? Are we just done? That's weird.
I don't, other than you checking your watch while I was talking and making faces at the camera, yes, we've gotten along very well. But I think that's the beauty of it all, though. I mean, what we figured out over time, strategy and the creative and how they live together in harmony, right? And there are battles for that, because if it's all strategy and it's all heady and it's all there, it's not going to.
It's all awesome.
It is, but there is no creative spark to that. And if it's all creative, there's no strategy. They have to work together, and that's kind of what's gotten us here over time, and it's made our clients successful in the process is by having both those voices. So there is conflict with that, but at the same time, yes, we agree on those things because it's not our first day on the job.
This is true.
So we have a process that we've honed over the years that makes sense, and that goes into everything, whether it's a logo project or messaging or strategy or whatever we're doing. So
all right, that is an excellent wrap-up thought. Thank you all for joining us for this first in-person side-by-side He Said, She Said Razor Branding podcast. I think we might do it again. Let us know if you think we should, and download the ebook and learn some things about doing rebranding. Michael, thank you for your time.
Nobody's still listening right now.
They listen to the end.
They're 15. I don't listen to the whole podcast.
Okay, listen. I get the stats. We have 98% impactful plays, which means 98% of the listeners make it past, I think it's 75% of the thing. They're making it to the end, man.
Right, we'll
They're
see.
around.
Hopefully the ebooks gets downloaded. It is a good ebook, by the way. It is really good.
Thank you.
I really like it. Yeah, you did most of the writing on that.
Exactly.
Which is rare.
I see why you have to take the compliment away. You give it and then you take it right back.
Yeah,
That's
it's
embarrassing.
Good, it's good. It looks good. It's easy to read.
Oh, it looks good. See, now we're back to you complimenting your
Well,
team.
It does, but I know I think the meat behind it is good too, and it's a good resource. And again, it's not like I hate these things. I hate being in advertising. I hate being selling ourselves. I like to kind of be on the back of that, but at the same time, this is a great way to kind of do your research, learn about the process, and just put that thought in your head. And if you're considering it or not considering it, or because somebody's going to bring it up at some point because it's topical. Do the right way, finding the right process, the right partners, all these different things, all the things we talked about today. So, and is it relevant to you? Is it the answer? Maybe not.
Right.
There's a bunch of other things to consider. It's not always just that, but it's one thing to consider, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Thank you all for being with us, and we'll see you again next time on He Said, She Said, Razor Branding Podcast.
When the day is through.